What up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place, coming to you today with a horrible, shambling amalgamation of the two most watched kinds of content on this channel. It's just a little bit of spoiler video, a little bit of list video, because Wizards has decided to give us 24 more brand new Final Fantasy cards. So I figured the best thing to do would be to read them and rank them. Sounds fun to do, so I hope it's fun to you. Now, we got to see 6 cards apiece from 4 different Final Fantasy games this time around. Not really sure how they came to the decision to include specifically these 4 games, but we did get Final Fantasy 1 stuff. Woohoo, that's actually one of my favorites, weirdly, but there's also Final Fantasy 8 and 9 stuff, which I'm very happy about, and Final Fantasy 15 stuff, which I guess is fine. Matter of fact, the first couple of cards we're going to look at today are from Final Fantasy 15. Again, no shade to FF15, it's a fine game. I liked it all right, but that said, the first couple of cards we'll look at are not the most powerful cards in the bunch for sure, although one of them could be alright, and that's why I'm putting Fishing Gear at number 24 effectively. It's kind of an honorable mention because this one could be a little bit better than I'm giving it credit for here. This bad boy is an equipment that costs 3 to cast and 2 to equip, which is already kind of a lot. Like, are you as good as a sort of whatever? You know, and I'm really hoping that a fishing rod isn't as good as one of these legendary swords, but let's find out together. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top card of that player's library. Okay, what do you do with it then? Well, if it's a permanent card, you can just put it on the table under your control. Pretty good. If you don't do that, instead, you can get a 1/1 fish creature token. So if you get an instant or a sorcery, you still get a fish out of the deal. And if you get a thing you'd rather just not play, which I guess will happen, you still get the fish. So that's like worst case scenario right there. But best case scenario is obviously you land a big one in the boat. You know, you land like a 10 mana creature or a 5 mana enchantment or just something wild. And this could end up being extremely powerful or whiff over and over. You know, it costs 3 to cast, 2 to equip, and it has to pass the 2 to equip check, the removal check inherent in that phase of operations. And then you actually have to get in for combat damage, which is easier said than done. And then you have to actually, you know, have fished something good up, which again is not always going to happen. So I don't know that this card actually passes the multiple checks that it has to go through to become a decent card, but man, when you land that big bass, you're going to be pretty happy. So it's a neat card for sure. Next at 24, technically, we've got another FF15 card and another one that kind of could be way more powerful than I'm giving it credit for here. This is Flash Photography. It's 4 mana, 2 and double blue for a sorcery that creates a token copy of any permanent on the entire battlefield, but it has flash if it targets a permanent that you control specifically. You can also flash this back for 4 and 2 blue. Put more film in the pack, you're good to go, but it costs a little bit more to get that extra film. I think this could be okay. I like that it just copies like any permanent on the whole table. That seems crazy. I guess you can copy lands at instant speed for 4 mana as long as they're your own lands, and that's kind of neat. Again, I guess, like everything you could do with this card is like, I guess, you know. But at sorcery speed, it's even worth playing if it's copying something good enough that an opponent controls. You know, oh, you couldn't afford to nick those or Gaia's Cradle. They're in your deck, you know. So I guess I do like the flexibility on this, if nothing else. But in some ways, especially compared to some of the other stuff that we saw that was a little bit more innovative, if nothing else, this just kind of looks like a normal Magic card. Next at 23 is Duelist Flame, which kind of reminds me a little bit of Fishing Gear in some ways. It's like a reverse Fishing Gear that's also a instant, very weird card. But this is double red and X for an instant that you can only cast on a blocked creature that you control. Okay, so weird enough already, but you cast it on a guy that is currently being blocked that you have control of. The creature gets plus X plus 0 and gains trample until end of turn, and whenever it does combat damage to a player, what you're going to do is exile that many cards, however much damage it did, exile that many cards from the top of your library, and you can cast one of them cards without paying its mana cost, and the rest go on bottom, which is kind of wild, but again, you're only looking at as many cards as you're doing damage, right? And the card actually costs a good bit to cast if you want to give your creature like plus 3 plus 0, but I think some of the time, if a creature already has high power and trample, you really only pay in 2 mana for this. You don't have to pump X into it like whatsoever. The creature just like, I guess if it didn't have trample, it just gets trample at that point. Trample's over for 4 points because it's already got 6 or 7 power. And then you're kind of in the money. You can do whatever you want. You're getting a lot of looks at that point and a free card. on the stack. So I think that there's definitely some good stuff about this. Like the first 2 cards we looked at today. Don't get me wrong. I don't know if these are not powerful, right? But at the same time, I think this is a bit situational, and it too may whiff. And is it worth the opportunity cost to put in your deck in the first place when you've only got so many slots and yada yada? I'm just not sure exactly where this fits. But I do think that in things that, double the number of combat damage triggers and stuff like that, this could be really, really good. So I like a few things about this card. Not going to lie, it's like a Howl from Beyond that gets you a card. That's pretty sick, but I'm just not sure how often it's going to really see play, but I'm willing to be wrong on it. But next at 21 here, we've got Campsite Cuisine, or Campsite Cuisine, as Chef Ramsay would say. Have you ever noticed that Gordon Ramsay says it weird? I don't know. Do they say it that way in other parts of the world? Maybe I sound ignorant right now, but cuisine it's a weird word. Anyway, this costs 2 mana. It's 1 and a green for an enchantment from FF15, and I'm telling you, not all the FF15 cards are bad. This one's actually pretty good, but it's, again, kind of narrow depending on what kind of deck you're building. So this 2 mana green enchantment basically says that whenever it or a legendary creature you control enters, you get a food token, which is already kind of okay in certain decks. But whenever you attack, you can sacrifice X foods. And for each food you sacrificed, a creature you control gets +3/+3, gains trample and indestructible until end of turn, which is okay. In food decks, this is a really nice way of kind of busting through, They've got a couple of different sort of overrun effects in food decks, in Knight of Sweet's Revenge and Provisions Merchant. Is that the guy I'm thinking of? I don't know. I guess we'll find out during editing. But, there's a couple of ways that these decks try to break through in the later game, but they're all pretty low power. This, on the other hand, sacrifice, 3 foods, and suddenly 3 different guys get +3/+3 trample and indestructible, which is just insane. So I think that's actually pretty good. And the fact that it can get you a food whenever you play a legendary guy is good too, especially in like Quina. Gourmet, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this thing's name right. It might be Quina. I don't know. But one way or the other. I've been kind of messing around with this deck lately. I've been meaning to make a YouTube video about like 100 things you can do with Quina. And I've been kind of having, again, a good time with it. And all I'm going to say is that if you get this card down, the one from FF15, Campsite Cuisine, on turn 2, if you just happen to do that, then on turn 3, play Quina out of the command zone. You get a food when you do that. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Because you get the frog, you know what I'm saying? There's actually a lot of different ways to use this thing. And I'm always excited when I see food support. If you can't tell by looking at me, I like food. But I'm just, not sure that the food decks really had a whole lot of great late game tools before this. But this is probably exactly what they needed. But we've reached our first legendary dude. It's Garland Royal Kidnapper at number 20 here. That's a name for a magic card. 4 mana, 2 blue-black for a 3/4 legendary human knight. Whenever it enters the battlefield, target opponent becomes the monarch. Stick with me here. Whenever an opponent becomes the monarch, you're going to gain control of target creature they control for as long as they're the monarch. Okay? And creatures you control but do not own get +2/+2 and can't be sacrificed, which is so dumb. Why did you put that line of text on the card? I really don't understand how you started with the card that's like really interesting flavor wise. You're using the monarch mechanic for a reason that actually makes sense. I kind of like the flavor of that. It's worth using monarch as a mechanic so long as you're doing it for flavorful purposes some of the time. And I think you did a good job with it until the last 3 words. Why can't they be sacrificed? It's ridiculous. That's the whole fun sometimes of thief decks and stuff, is that the blue things steal creatures. Sometimes the black cards do too, but for the most part, the blue things steal creatures, and you sacrifice them with the black effects. And that's why can't I? How come I can't do that? I want to like this so much because I really like thief decks in blue and black, but I'm not sure that this is it. At all. Why can't it be sacrificed? I'm so mad about that. But on a similar tack to Garland, and if you want to use Garland as your commander, go ahead, but I'm actually pretty sure it's supposed to be in the 99 of this card. Edea, Possessed Sorceress here. So this is 5 mana, Grixis colors. 2, blue, red, black for a 2/5, weird stat line. Legendary Human Warlock with Ward 2. So 5 mana commander with Ward 2. Little safer to play than others, right? But at the beginning of combat on your turn, you're going to gain control of a creature an opponent controls. You untap it, it gains haste till EOT. So kind of a threaten effect every turn on a stick, which is pretty cool. But whenever a creature you control but do not own dies, in this case, you return it to the battlefield under the opponent's control that originally owned it, right? And you draw a card. So at least it's got some card draw on it. But how come, at least in this case, I can sack the guys? Like, again, the Grixis one understands. You add red to the mix and it's like, oh, you're sacrificing guys. Like, yes, thank you. So I can sacrifice the guys that I gain control of, but my opponent gets them back. Dumb. It's like, I just think that's kind of silly. The steal and sack gamers out there, the deck is literally called steal and sack. You can't just take one part out of the equation and just, oh, have fun. Well, I can't now. So again, I'm a little heated about these last couple of cards, but there are good cards in here. And honestly, both these last two cards are like decent commander build-arounds. They might be fun to brew around and all that. Come on. Next, though, is Chocobo Camp here at, I guess, number 18. This is just a land that enters tapped unless you control a legendary creature, which should be easy enough to do in your commander deck. This is just a good bird land that's going to go in bird decks, and people have been building those in commanders. So basically, you can tap this thing for just a green mana, which is fine. An untapped land for the most part that you can tap for green is already good enough in a lot of decks. But the next time you cast a bird spell after you add that green mana, that bird is going to interplay with a +1/+1 counter on it. You can also, there's more, you can pay 4 mana, 2 and double green, and tap this down to create one of those chocobos, right? It's a little 2/2 chocobo creature token. It's a bird. And whenever you play a land, it gets +1/+0 till end of turn. So you make a chocobo. That's sick. Now we're getting into the better stuff, I think. This is, again, just untapped land at least 40% of the time, but probably way more than that. You're playing commander. You've got a legendary guy, like, for the most part. It's shouldn't be too hard to make this come into play untapped. We'll get birds more swole and make birds for you. Gross. There's a lot of good stuff about this, and it's extremely low opportunity cost, but it is a little bit narrow. It just goes in the bird decks, but it makes them way better. But next is Brilliant Wings, which is actually a pretty normal Magic card, but it's one that I'm still excited about. This isn't necessarily, God, we're how long into this video, and I'm just now mentioning this. This isn't necessarily the absolute best cards in order from this whole product launch. This is just the ones that I'm kind of most excited to play, and that will often correlate with how powerful a card is, but not always. I'm just excited to put Brilliant Wings in a couple of different decks. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for an aura that enchants a creature, and that creature gets flying and hexproof, and this has flash. So you flash this in to protect a guy, also incidentally gives it flying, so it's harder to block, and I like that. But we're not done yet. Whenever a creature you control enters, you can pay 1 mana and just move this aura onto that creature, which is nasty. Kind of a big fan of this in like all kinds of aura-based enchantment decks, whether it's, you know, mono white, light paws, or whatever you're doing. Or you're playing Sithis, or you're playing, you know, Ariette. We just built an Ariette deck for the channel, so there's a lot that this can go into as far as Enchantress goes. Usually white is a color. If you're playing, you know, all that glitters in your deck, you're probably also playing this, you know, just like Shard Mage's Rescue. This is a protection spell that also triggers all your Enchantress effects, which is nuts. So I think this card is a lot better than it may appear. You know, it looks like, oh, this could be a decent uncommon in a standard set that doesn't see that much play. But in Commander, I think this has like plenty of places to go, and it will go them. It will go them. English, man. You know what I'm trying to say. It's a good card. But next is the Destined Warrior. Pardon me if I look at my phone for this one, because I can never remember all the different creature types that are supposed to be in a party. But this is an Esper colored 4 mana legend. So 1 blue, black, white for a 3/3 legendary human. Guess what the other creature type is on this. It's a warrior. It also has First Strike and Vigilance and Menace. That's pretty good keyword soup there, but clerics, rogues, warriors, and wizards, nice, cost you 1 less to cast. That's a bunch of different creature types. Whenever you attack, all your guys get +1/+0 till end of turn, so it just kind of has built-in battle cry. But if you have a full party, now all your creatures get +3/+0 until end of turn. I thought they might also gain another ability, but they don't. So a full party +3/+0 is nasty if you have enough creatures on the table. But even if you only have like a full party and nothing else, you know, that's giving at least like 4 creatures a huge bonus, including this thing with the First Strike and the Menace, you know, coming in for like 6 damage is pretty good. But I really like the cost reduction on this. You know, I wasn't the biggest fan of the party mechanic in the like Dungeons and Dragons set, but I also wasn't the the biggest detractor either. I knew a lot of people that didn't really love that mechanic, but I was fine with it, and it's good to see a little bit more support, and specifically a decent commander for a deck like this. The problem is that it doesn't come down until turn 4 probably, and at that point its cost reduction isn't as important, but it's still going to be pretty decent on the next turn when you untap with it. So I don't know, there's things I like about this from like a build around standpoint. But another cool build around commander that looks weird at first, but I actually think he might work out well, is Seifer Balamb Rival. So this is 4 mana, 2 a black and a red for a 4/3 legendary human mercenary with first strike, which will become important in just a second. Whenever you attack, you goad a creature that player controls. And really fun line of text here. Whenever a creature attacking one of your opponents is blocked by more than one creature, the creature attacking one of your opponents gains death touch until end of turn. So basically that means he works nicely with himself. Whenever he attacks one of your opponents, you not only goad one of their guys, which is kind of nice, but also if he for whatever reason gets double blocked ever, now he gets death touch and has first strike. So he takes both of those people out pretty easily, right? That's gross, but if you've got a bunch of first strike guys, suddenly he becomes really good. If you've got a bunch of menace guys, he suddenly becomes really good. So if you're trying to build around menace and you want to put like J. Jonah Jameson in the 99 or something like that, then Seifer is actually a pretty good commander to use. If you've got a bunch of menace dudes, they have to double block them, and when that happens, creature gains death touch every time. So, and for what it's worth, the goad line of text is kind of all right too, and he's not like the worst investment for 4 mana. Just altogether, this is a neat one to build around because we haven't really seen a commander like this before, so it gets the kind of brain juices flowing or whatever. But altogether, I think he's like midway down the list in terms of overall power level, but I'm a little bit excited to try to kind of see what we can do with him. And next up, yet another build around commander. There actually aren't as many as you would think, but they are all kind of grouped together in some ways. This is Noctis, heir apparent, costs Esper colors, so 3 mana, blue, black, white, for legendary human noble. He is a 2/3. I had to double check that. Whenever a creature enters during combat, whenever a creature you control enters during combat, that's a neat line, you may attach target equipment you control to target creature that you control. Note how that's worded, by the way. Before I finish this, note that you don't have to attach an equipment to the creature that entered. You just, whenever a creature enters during combat, then you attach whatever equipment you want to whatever dude you want, which is cool. But you can also pay 3 mana of any color and warp strike. So you're going to exile Noctis and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next declare attacker step. It can't be blocked that combat. So you understand why I had to read some of this one. It is worded extremely weirdly in some spots, but still very neat just on the first line of text. You want to build a commander deck that is able to play creatures during combat. Well, blue and white can do that because they have flash creatures. So does black, for that matter. So that's easy enough. But you've also got like mobilize and other abilities that, like, whenever a creature attacks, you put more creatures into play, right? Or maybe you've got artifacts that can create creatures at instant speed, so you do it during your combat step. And now you can shift equipments around and stuff. My problem with this is that at its heart, it is an equipment's commander. Right? And you kind of have to pay 3 mana in order to just like equip it for free. So most of the time you're not really saving that much on an equip cost of something. But I do kind of like that if someone targets Noctis with something, you can pay 3 mana and kind of make sure that it skirts around that removal. You can save it from removal spells, and then it comes back in ready to attack during your combat step anyway. So I'm, well, ready to attach an equipment to something at least anyway, so that's kind of nice. But altogether, again, neat commander that we can build around an ability that we don't usually get to build around, and we get to kind of look for cards we wouldn't normally use, and I'm always into commanders like that. But next to number 13 is Search for Dagger, which could be a really powerful card. This is just 2 mana, 1 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever your commander enters or attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library, you can put a legendary creature from among those cards into your hand, the rest go on bottom in any order. So not a must play white enchantment, but in decks that are pretty heavy on legendary creatures, I think this is a slam dunk, almost must play, especially if you are planning to attack with your commander a lot. And you're not necessarily looking to attack with every legendary matters commander, right? Like, you don't always even attack with Joda, although you usually do. This probably goes in Joda, but in like Seifer, how often are you actually attacking with Seifer? So you're really just getting the inner's trigger, And even if Even if you're not attacking, even if you're not attacking with Sarah, you just cast Sarah twice in the game and you get 2 cards off of this, that's pretty good. But you could whiff, it's not a tutor or anything, it's just a top 6. So deck has to really be chock full of legendary dudes in order to make this work. So again, it might be a little bit more narrow than I think, and it might be really high opportunity cost. It's just going to sit on the table for like 3 turns before it actually does anything, and then it whiffs or something. There is actually a pretty high risk reward going on with this card, but I imagine if it can draw you 2, 3, 4 cards in a game, get you some of the best legends in your deck, you're going to be happy you included it. So I'm a little bit on the fence about it, but I do think ultimately it could be great. But next we're at the exact halfway down the list point here to look at Amarant Coral. This is a cool little Gruul commander here. 4 mana, 2 red, green for a 5/4 human monk with trample that attacks each turn if able. So like Juggernaut vibes on the mana cost, kind of the stat line, that line of text, yes. But here's the deal. Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each other opponent as well. So that's going to be fun to build around. I mean, you're going to have to protect it in some ways, but just make its power huge, and then suddenly everyone has to fear this every turn. Now, it has to attack if able, so it can kind of run itself into some bad situations. But even if all you're playing is like, I don't know, unnatural growth, you got that on the table, you're swinging for like 10 damage every single turn. But there's obviously plenty of other ways to augment this thing's power and get to swinging for like 20 damage plus on one person, and even if they can, throw something in the way of it, they're still taking 15, which means everyone else takes 15. This is actually a really simple design that I think is perfectly Gruul. Like incredibly perfectly Gruul card on this that in the modern age is kind of like normal stats and keyword abilities for the mana cost, which is wild to say considering what those numbers actually are, but it looks pretty normal for Commander. But I actually do think this could be a really, really fun one to do some stuff with. But into the bottom half of the list and into the honorable mention for the top 10, we call it. This is Judgment of Alexander. I think a lot of people wanted Alexander to get a decent card in the Final Fantasy set, and he just kind of didn't. So if Alexander's your favorite summon in the game, I guess you got a decent piece finally. 3 mana, 2 into white for an instant that's going to prevent all damage to you by sources opponents control this turn, and whenever damage from a creature is prevented in this way, then suddenly your commander is going to deal damage equal to its power to that creature, which is insane. It's a fog effect that can kind of be a settle the wreckage for less mana if your commander is large enough. Even if your commander isn't big enough, 5, 6 power commander or something, you just have like 2, 3 power commander, I imagine it's still going to pick off a couple of creatures that are attacking you. So this is kind of a settle the wreckage and kind of at its absolute baseline level, a fog that can also counter, I'm using that word kind of a lot of elastic to that meaning here, but can also kind of counter like fireball effects and stuff like that does damage to you. So that's pretty good. 3 mana is more than you want to pay for a fog effect, but this does a lot more than your typical fog effect. So I love this. Before we move on, just real quick, this card is another one of those cards that kind of gives me that cold feeling in my chest. There's a pit of worry somewhere in my stomach that this card might actually be much better than I'm rating it, and it's just all over white commander decks. But I'm probably wrong, but I do really right now like this card, but also fear and respect it a little bit. But we'll move on to number 10 here, which is Fated Clash. This is something else that's capable of taking a bunch of creatures off the table. 5 mana, 3 and double white for a sorcery, but you can cast it as though it had flash if a creature is attacking and also a creature is blocking. So interesting set of circumstances, but it happens all the time. Target creature you control and target creature an opponent controls both gain indestructible till end of turn, and then you destroy all the creatures. So that's kind of neat. You can politically use this, I think, to be like, hey, Tabitha, what do you want to keep a creature? What's that? It's going to cost you something. What do you got for me? Something like that. So I kind of like the political aspects of this. If you currently have an ally at the table, you're like, hey, Bobby, I'm saving you, guy. You know what I mean? So there's ways to use this in that way, but it's also just a sweeper that keeps your commander or their most important creature on the table, which is just good. Just a solid magic card. Now, next is a card that probably really shouldn't be in the top 10. I'll remind you that this is a list of cards that I'm most excited to play with from this whole shindig, and I am really excited to get a copy of Vivi's Persistence, especially considering it's probably going to end up being pretty cheap before it's all said and done. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for an instant that makes one of those wizard guys. It makes one of those wizards tokens that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you deal a damage to each opponent. But also, whenever your commander enters or attacks, you can pay 2 mana and return this from your graveyard to your hand. Awesome. Super awesome. In Black Waltz number 3 specifically, that deck really wants this card. But I imagine that all kinds of like spell slingy decks in blue, red, black, red, white, whatever, like want this card because, you know, first of all, I am always looking, it feels like, in Commander for cards that are not creatures, but make creatures, right? Like sorceries and stuff like that, instants that make creatures. For certain decks that want, like, instant and sorcery triggers, like I'm playing a bunch of Archmage Emeritus, or I'm playing Locust God, or like something like that, right? Or again, I'm playing Black Waltz number 3, so I want spells, but you also need creatures on the table. And this kind of does both, you know, it's like a Kessig Flame Breather that also triggers other Kessig Flame Breathers and also comes back from your graveyard every so often. That's really good. I mean, I want it to just be a free put it back into your hand, but that would make the card very good. I'm a little annoyed that you have to pay mana for it, but I will be more than willing to pay mana for it a lot of the time. So kind of way too big of a fan of this, but I really like these little wizard dudes that ping your opponent when you cast non-creatures. Those are like my favorite thing in Final Fantasy as a set. So I'm just really good to see another nod to those, and a really good one, I think. But next we'll look at a red spell that might end up in every red deck from now on, but it might not. I'm not actually sure, but Mega Flare looks like a pretty decent removal spell to me because it's effectively a 3-for-1 a lot of the time. That's good. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a sorcery. You can kick this for 5 extra mana, 3 and double red. And if you do that, it's going to be putting a 6/6 flying dragon into play for you, which is pretty good considering what the rest of the card does. But regardless of whether or not you kick it, you're going to choose a creature that is controlled by each opponent. So for each opponent, choose a creature that they control. And then Mega Flare is going to deal damage equal to the greatest power among creatures you control to each of those creatures. So again, if you have a large enough dude out, or even if you don't, you know, like let's say you have a 3-power guy out and each opponent has a creature that's, you know, an X2 on the table. Well, this is going to be, at that point, a 3-for-1. And I think it's pretty easy to make this a 3-for-1 a lot of the time. And even if it's a 2-for-1, like, you know, right now Sally doesn't have any creatures or whatever it is. Like, even if it's just a 2-for-1, I still think that you're getting a good amount of value. You know, not many people are playing like 1-for-1 removal spells in Commander anymore, unless they remove literally everything. Like Chaos Warp is a good example of a red spell that you might still play as a removal spell, even though it's a 1-for-1. But this being a 3-for-1 is something that red really doesn't have all the access to in the world outside of effects like Arc Lightning. And that's not always going to hit 3 things either, obviously. So I don't know. I think this actually could be a really, if not powerful, then at least popular removal spell, especially in mono red decks that don't have access to a ton of other removal. In Gruul decks, it could be good too, because they typically have huge creatures that go well with this. So if you kick it, it's pretty good, but you don't have to. I think for 3 mana, a 3-for-1 is a really efficient raid. Next at number 7, this card was once my number 1 card, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, maybe you're more limited than I think you are. But Warrior's Resolve still looks fantastic to me. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment that at first just says creatures you control have training, which is actually a forgotten and pretty decent ability. So whenever a couple of creatures or more attack, whenever a creature attacks alongside a creature that has greater power than it, then the smaller creature gets a +1/+1 counter. That's not bad. Now, at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with a +1/+1 counter that attacked this turn, you get to draw a card. So I think for 3 mana, this is going to draw an extra card like most turns, and it can end up putting a bunch of +1/+1 counters on guys throughout the game, especially if you have a much larger creature than all your other creatures. Then training is going to apply to multiple creatures for multiple turns, and that's awesome. So I don't know, this could be the kind of thing that actually puts several +1/+1 counters on creatures every turn, and also just happens to draw a card too. And if that's what it does every turn, it's extremely powerful. But I worry that it's not actually as easy to enable as I want it to be. I worry that training's not as good as I want it to be. I worry that if you already have a bunch of creatures attacking in the first place every single turn with no worries, then you're probably already winning the game, and blah, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of like things my brain wants to tell me about this card, but what it also looks like to a different part of my brain is 3+1/+1 counters a turn and a drawn card, which is astronomically crazy. So just keep your eye on this. But next we're going to take a look at Rinoa, Angel Wing, another 3-mana white card for the same mana cost, 2 and a white, but this one a little bit different. Kind of gives me Luminous Broodmoth vibes, but I do like this. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white, for a 2/4 legendary human rebel warlock. I needed my phone to remember its creature types. It's a rebel, by the way. That's neat. You can play this in like Lin Civi. That's dope. At the beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control with flying get +1/+1, and they gain vigilance until end of turn. And whenever one or more attacking creatures you control die, you may return one of them to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. Do this only once a turn. So it doesn't get a finality counter. I want to point that out, but it does get a flying counter. That's gross. You probably want to put this in like mono white or blue white skies. You got a deck with a bunch of flyers. This goes directly in. Sometimes you don't really care about the flying counter necessarily. You just care about the fact that some of your attackers can come back. One attacker every turn can die and then come back, repeating an enter the battlefield trigger or something like that. So actually a pretty tricky card that doesn't necessarily need flyers to work. But once you've, a couple of creatures have died in combat and come back and they attack, they get flying and vigilance, and like, I don't know. It's a pseudo anthem effect in some ways that gives your flyers vigilance. Like turns all your creatures into Sarah Angels. That's pretty okay, just on one way, on one axis. But also, being able to recur creatures, again, like a la Luminous Broodmoth or a creature like that, is also really powerful for a pretty efficient mana cost. So again, I think we're getting into the really good stuff now. And we should be by now. We're at number 5, right? The Destined Black Mage is up next, but we're going to go through several Final Fantasy 1 cards in the next few entries. I definitely think that's the most powerful of these different mini sets here, but Black Mage is looking good to me. Another card that's going straight into a Black Waltz number 3, but let's see what this does. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 3/2 legendary human wizard with Death Touch. You can also pay a black and tap it, and suddenly another target creature you control gains Death Touch till end of turn. Not too shabby. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this guy deals 1 damage to everybody. So he's like that. But if you have a full party, suddenly he deals 3 damage to each player instead. So that is awesome. Incentivizes getting a full party in like Rakdos Black Waltz number 3. Or if this is your commander, which it can be, it's legendary, then suddenly you're trying to find a full party in black. And you can. Turns out that there's all of these creature types in that color. So I don't know. It might be a fun one to build, but I think this mostly goes in the 99 of both, decks like Black Waltz number 3 that are kind of spell slingy. This can be a second gutter snipe of sorts for you, especially if you end up getting a full party. It's great. But also in decks that care about Death Touch. This is amazing too. So I just think this does a lot of cool things, man, and I like it a lot. But I like a lot of these FF1 cards a lot. Like, for instance, the Destined White Mage. This is a little bit more narrow than the last legendary that we looked at from the FF1 extra cards, but it's really good in the deck. It's good, and man, this is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/3 legendary human cleric with lifelink. You can pay a white and tap it to give a creature you control lifelink until end of turn. And whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that you control. And if you have a full party, you instead put 3 +1/+1 counters on that creature. Again, maybe it's a little bit harder to find a full party in white, but I'm pretty sure you can do it. And for that matter, even if you don't have a full party, this is just nuts in any sort of mono white life gain deck. It could be your commander. I'll say that again, but in like black white life game with Amalia as the commander or something like that, this is still really potent, man. Give any creature, give the Ajani's Pridemate, give the Essence Channeler. Did I get the name of that creature right? It's on screen. It's the bat. It's the bat guy. Give that guy lifelink, and a bunch of other Ajani's Pridemate creatures that don't already have lifelink. Giving them lifelink is always really, really good because they're usually really big, and now they'll trigger themselves when they do any kind of damage in combat. So I just love the sort of activated ability on this, but especially being able to effectively turn any creature on your side of the table, this one included, into an Ajani's Pridemate is a really good ability for those decks because they tend to have a bunch of like small flying lifelink guys anyway. And I'm still talking about commander here. I think in a life gain deck, this is just like basically a must include, and it makes them even better than they were, and they were getting better over the last few months. Well, next we got a pretty simple card here at number 3, but one that I think pretty effective. This is Chaos Shrine's Black Crystal. 4 mana, 3 and a black for a legendary artifact. Whenever a creature you control dies, exile it. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a creature card exiled with Chaos Shrine's Black Crystal onto the battlefield under your control with a finality counter on it. So it kind of sucks that it gets a finality counter, but there's some things about this that remind me of like Seifer the Super Void or Grave Pact before it. We're getting a lot of these kind of cards in black now, and I kind of like that. You know, it appears as though, and correct me if I'm wrong because I could be, I still think the card is good even if it doesn't, but it says whenever a creature you control dies, exile it. So does that mean you still get death triggers? It should. I mean, this card has to see the creature die in order to actually trigger. So that means that all the other cards that would see the creature die also trigger. So let me know if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. So could actually go interestingly in like certain aristocrats builds and stuff. But I think it's just fine in most decks as like kind of a copy of Grave Pact. That's cool, you know? So, I don't know. I think this is actually a really powerful Magic card that could just kind of like generically go in a lot of different black decks. But I guess we're going to look at my favorite commander in the set. When I was writing the thing, I didn't expect this to happen. Especially a card that says choose a number on it. I would have never thought would be my favorite commander in the set. But I think there's a lot you can do with Squall Gunblade Duelist here. Forgive me for reading this, because again, this is worded oddly. And there's I have to read it. This is Mardu colors, so I'm already hooked. Red, black, and white for a 3/2 legendary human mercenary with first strike. When he enters, choose yourself a number. Get ready to do that. Whenever one or more creatures attack one of your opponents, if any of those creatures have power or toughness equal to the number you chose, Squall deals damage equal to its power to defending player. Okay, so first of all, this is not whenever your guys attack. It's worded similarly to Seifer. So whenever one or more creatures that anyone control attack one of your opponents, this can trigger. So if you chose 2, let's say they attack with 3 guys and one of them has 2 power because you chose 2. Now Squall gets to deal 3 damage to the player that is being attacked currently. Even if you're not doing the attacking, Squall gets to deal damage to that player. That's really interesting because all you have to do is increase Squall's power somehow. There's lots of ways to do it in these 3 colors specifically. I know we're not talking green or anything, but especially red has plenty of ways to increase a creature's power. You know, I think this could actually, again, work in an interesting political way, but even just beyond the politics of it, I think that this could hit for a lot of damage pretty reliably on several turns in a row in a game, and almost certainly always on your own turn. So pretty cool commander to build around. I've said it enough times in this video, but I think of all the commanders we've seen with interesting new build aroundy abilities that we've never really seen versions of before, this is for sure my favorite. You can do a lot with this. But final card of the video, and again, I'll remind you, these are the ones that I am most excited to play with. And if I had to choose my favorite, the one I look forward to the most, it would almost certainly be the Destined Thief. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 legendary human rogue. I knew it was a rogue. Why did I look at my phone? So it cannot be blocked, first of all. Cool line of text. But you can also pay a blue and tap it like some of the other Destined party members and give a creature an ability. This time, it's that creature is unblockable this turn. Wild. Also, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to an opponent, you get to loot. So you draw a card and you discard a card. But if you have a full party, instead, you draw 3 cards. Even if you never get a full party together, it's pretty amazing to have an unblockable guy that kind of loots every single turn. That can stock up your graveyard for whatever reason you want to and just see more cards from your deck. So you have got an effect for 3 mana here that sees an extra card every single turn, does graveyard shenanigans when you want it to, sometimes draws 3 cards, is always unblockable, and can make your 6/6 unblockable. I think that we have a winner, baby. I overvalue unblockability. I will say that about myself, and I know that about myself, but I still think that regardless of how much I overvalue it, unblockability is still a crazy thing to be able to do, depending on what or who your commander is in the first place. But, you know, all the extra value is not just gravy or icing. It's a whole other piece of chicken, you know what I mean? Like, you get to just loot or draw a bunch of cards. crazy. Like, to me, this is a pretty efficient card to cast. It is unblockable itself, and everything it does beyond that is a thing you almost always want to be doing in a game of Magic anyway. So just an unbelievable piece of cardboard by my estimation. And again, if you noticed, 5 out of 6 of the top, 4 out of 5 of the top 5 cards in my list, at least, are all FF1 cards. So that's probably the set I'm going to be wanting to get. But that is Allski Kowalski for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Just let me know how you felt about all of these and like what, how you would have changed the list around, what you're excited to play with if you are excited to play with any of them. I think that there are some really good designs in this thing. Even though some of them are kind of wonky and wordy and whatever, they kind of boil down to some really interesting designs we haven't seen before. So let me know what you're looking forward to from this whole thing, and that's more or less it. But I do want to give a special shout out to Durangan, a fan of the channel, who really helped me out this month. I've gotten Patreon donations for a few years and Twitch donations for just about as long and all that, but we had an issue this month with some things that happened, and Durangan helped us out just about as much as anyone else has ever helped us out in the past. So I want to give a special shout out to Durangan if you're watching this video. I've already contacted you to say what's up and thank you and all that, but I just wanted the world to know how awesome you are, dudes. Thank you, Durangan. That means a lot to me, to say the very least. But apart from that, if you want to help out around here, you can check out the Patreon. You can do it. We got its link in the description. It's just $1 a month and all that. But you can also like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to do things that don't cost money. That also helps out a good bit. So thank you, Durangan. Again, I appreciate that. And also thank you, each and every one of the patrons that help out this channel every month. But that's all I've got for this one. Just get down there, let me know how you feel about it, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.